Severe drought for the last 6 months in Baringo County, and the local communities they have really faced it rough getting water, because they must fetch this water either from the dams, either from the rivers flowing to Lake Baringo, or they get it from their roof catchment, and most of these have already been exhausted.
Hapo hivyo tukaenda hadi Ruko. Fika Ruko tukashuka, after kushuka tukatembea, tukaenda hadi tukafika penye kuna kinyesi ya giraffe. Tukapanda cliff, lakini hiyo cliff ilikuwa ngumu sana, lakini tulisucceed. Tukaona giraffe kwa mbali kiasi, lakini tukawakaribia, lakini hawakutungoja tuwakaribia sana, walitoka wakaenda.
Last time nikikuja mvua ilikuwa imenyesha.
Countryside is burning up. It is official now. It is the worst drought in a quarter century.
Sandy's effects blasted New York City, causing damage and destruction never seen before in America's largest city.
Climate change is basically putting our weather system on steroids, and the impacts of that can be really severe.
Anyone who says there's not a dramatic change in weather patterns, I think is denying reality.
We need to understand that we are living in a new normal. That new normal includes more extreme events, more disaster risks.
Tonight, the most powerful storm on the planet this year has slammed directly into the Philippines.
Climate change, erratic weather, pushes people over the edge. It goes very quickly from being a local economic problem to being a local political problem. And when it becomes a local political problem, it becomes a global security problem.
So what this has done, in many respects, has caused us to redefine and broaden the scope of what national security is.
We have inherited a definition of security from the last century, a century that was defined by 2 world wars and a Cold War.
During the Cold War, we wanted to reduce the risk of a nuclear strike on the U.S. homeland. Now we face different risks.
Are the risks associated with extreme weather threatening our national security? Can these events contribute to the fall of political regime or the strengthening of terrorist groups? And can innovation help us adapt to the new realities of climate change? Please join me now as we investigate these critical issues. Christian Parenti is an investigative journalist who reports from the world's most dangerous wars.
There were tanks up there.
When in Afghanistan, he was always accompanied by his translator and colleague, Ajmal.
Translate that.
No, I'm not asking.
This man.
I mean, if ISAF soldiers really murdered this guy when he was wounded, that's pretty significant. That's a war crime.
It's frightening but also exciting to report from conflict zones, and part of what I find rewarding about it is that one has a front row seat for history.
His most dangerous assignment was an interview with Taliban insurgents near the Pakistani border.
Kabul, Kandahar border with the Taliban.
Many people say that the Taliban receives support from the Pakistani government. Is the Taliban, does it receive support from Pakistan? How does it sustain itself?
That means, yes, Pakistan stands with us, and Pakistan is supporting us. They provide us with everything.
Suddenly, a military surveillance aircraft approaches.
Oh, this aircraft this is a detective aircraft.
So we should go? Let's go then.
10 months later, Parenti's friend and colleague was kidnapped by the Taliban. The video of Ajmal's captivity and appeal for freedom was broadcast around the world. But when Afghan President Hamid Karzai refused to exchange prisoners for Ajmal's release, he was beheaded by the Taliban.
Having had a colleague killed by the Taliban, you know, and then researching his death and dealing with his family, the thing that I took away from it was just how much heartbreak is involved in war. The bonds of solidarity get ripped to pieces, and the society becomes less and less coherent and more distrustful.
Ajmal received the hero's funeral, but the Taliban still retained the allegiance of the local population. This paradox triggered a question for Parenti. Why did the people continue to support the Taliban? His investigation took him into the poppy fields of Afghanistan. For centuries, the country was a major source of opium. Yet only 15 years ago, these fields of poppies were filled with wheat. That was when the Taliban-controlled government banned the growing of opium poppies, declaring them un-Islamic. Overnight, nearly all poppy farming stopped, eliminating nearly 3/4 of the world's supply of heroin. But after the Taliban was driven from power in 2001, two things happened. Its leaders desperately needed funds to finance its insurgency, and Afghanistan was hit by a prolonged and severe drought.
Northern Afghanistan is in the grips of a devastating drought affecting more than 1 million people.
The plains of northern Afghanistan should be carpeted with crops, but this year there's almost nothing.
Compounding the problem, the extreme weather event left thousands of farmers vulnerable to intimidation by the Taliban.
The only crop in Afghanistan that can survive there, given the severe drought conditions, is poppy. Poppy uses 1/6 the amount of water that wheat uses, so they turn to poppy because that's a way that you can feed your family under these drought conditions. And there's one side in the war that says, we will defend your right to grow this illegal drug crop. And when the eradication squads come in, we will attack them, we'll keep them out, and in exchange, you pay taxes when you move your crop out on the roads. If we ask you to hide some weapons for us, you do that. If we try and recruit some of your sons to join us, you don't stop us. It is a factor in helping to explain why the Taliban have an endless line of young recruits and why they have pretty significant support among poor Pashtun farmers in southern Afghanistan.
After discovering how the Taliban took advantage of an extreme weather event to fund its terrorist activities, Parenti decided to leave the war zone.
I started thinking this must be bigger than just Afghanistan. This connection between environmental crisis and violence is probably evident in other places. And so I went out to investigate how that might play out in other countries.
Christian Parenti's research took him to one of the driest and most barren regions in the world.
When I was in northwest Kenya in the Turkana region, the drought had been ongoing for about 7 years. Policies which have